file in here.
Okay. Sorry, I accidentally switched screens, Jeff. Just give me 1 sec.
No worries, no problem. Great, thank you. So for those who have joined us already, we're going to give folks 30 seconds or a minute to file in, and then we'll get going with the meeting. But thank you all for coming, for those of you who are here already. All right, so I see attendance holding pretty steady here, and obviously folks will continue to join us as we go, but good evening to this full public information meeting for the Reading Route 28 Main Street Resurfacing and Road Diet Pilot Project. My name is Jeff Dietrich, been working with DOT on public outreach and engagement for this job. Before we get going and Andy runs us through the majority of our presentation, I want to walk through a few of the logistics of this virtual meeting format. So Andy, if you could advance the slide for me, please. First off, the required disclaimer, this meeting is being recorded, and MassDOT, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, may choose to retain and distribute that video, still images from the video, audio, and or the Q&A transcript. By continuing to attend this virtual public meeting, you are consenting to participate in that recording event. Reading Community Television is also rebroadcasting this event on the public TV channel. So if you are not comfortable being recorded, please keep your camera off, keep your microphone muted, and refrain from chatting in the transcript box. So with the disclaimer out of the way, you may have noticed when you entered the meeting, you were automatically muted. This is so we can get through a presentation before we devote the majority of our time tonight to questions and answers. So we will do those Q&A after and any discussion after the presentation, but you'll see at the bottom of your window a Q&A icon, which is on the screen there. As we go, please feel free, and we encourage you to submit any questions or comments as they occur to you while they're fresh in your mind, or once the presentation is over. And we'll go through those in the order that we received them, as well as unmuting folks if they would prefer to offer questions verbally, which you can do by raising your hand. If you have any questions about how that works, you can just type a question into the chat, reach out to any of us throughout the presentation. We'll make sure that we get an answer to you before the Q&A section. But in the meantime, I will first introduce Andy Paul, who will run us through the majority of the presentation tonight. You're muted, Andy, sorry.
Thank you, Jeff. And thanks to all for joining us this evening. I'll be giving a quick overview of the project, the Reading Route 28 Road Diet Project, and schedule, the evaluation that we've done, and then present the South Main Street design and our next steps. I'll be joined this evening by Paul Stedman, the District Highway Director for District 4. And then during the Q&A this evening, we'll have several other technical folks from the project team and construction team available for Q&A. So with the overview and schedule and pilot evaluation, some of the information that we're presenting this evening is similar to what we've presented in the past. That will be, might be somewhat of a recap for some of you, but then there also is some new content, including bullet number 3, which discusses the South Main Street design. So with that, we'll move along. We'll start with project overview and schedule, the purpose and need of the project. The road diet itself and the pilot evaluation is related to the number of crashes that previous to construction we saw on this facility, both north and south of downtown Reading. The state owns, operates, and maintains Route 28. So I'll refer to those commonly as North Main Street or the north section of the project than the South Main or south section of the project. The average crash rate that we saw there was more than double what we see on similar facilities throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So a 4-lane undivided roadway with a similar type of volume and facility type. But really the main goal of the project was to state of good repair. A resurfacing project was identified through our ongoing asset management system and was really the impetus for doing the resurfacing, but then also for improving safety for people using this corridor. Calming traffic is a goal of ours on other projects, not just this Route 28 project. And then improving accessibility for pedestrians, not just along Route 28, but also crossing 28. And then to meet MassDOT's Complete Streets Healthy Transportation Policy. So as a part of the ongoing project delivery process, we identified a pilot, which has been underway since the spring of 2020. Our original schedule was to wrap up in the fall of 2020, but due to the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic and the change in driver behavior and traffic patterns throughout the Commonwealth, it was determined to extend the pilot then into spring and summer of 2021. The two competing interests as a part of this pilot are data quality. So the longer we do the pilot, the more information we can collect, which we'll present this evening, and compare that to conditions previous to the road diet. So collecting as much data as possible, analyzing and then gathering information from the public. But that conflicts with the pavement service life. So resurfacing the roadway requires 2 layers of asphalt, the top layer being the intermediate recourse is 1.5 inches, and then the surface course another 1.5 inches. Since really the beginning of the pilot, back up a couple slides, the spring of 2020 and summer of 2020 was when that first intermediate course was put down. Now, a year removed from that, the final surface course was put on the northern section of Route 28, and the southern section is scheduled to go into place in the coming weeks. And delaying the surface course increases the risk of reflective cracking. So cracking that would occur in the intermediate course and travel up through that surface course shown on that black and yellow image on the top right of the screen. So our schedule is similar to what we presented this past June, so just a couple of months ago, where the South Main Street pilot evaluation was concluded in July, and in August we prepared and adjusted structures along the corridor with a final pavement course, and striping will go down in this coming September. In parallel to that, we've had several public meetings and meetings also with town staff, and this evening we'll be showing the southern section and adjustments that we're planning to make as part of the final implementation of the road diet on the southern section. Throughout that process, we've continued to gather public input and have responded to those comments. So I'll go over quickly the evaluation, community feedback, and adjustments that we've made throughout, touch on some of the analysis of the data that we've done, and then get into the South Main Street design. The outreach started by door-to-door flyering. Pre-COVID, that was a thing that MassDOT was engaged in, really to the businesses on the southern section. We also had a business breakfast and info session hosted at the library. We then had to shift a lot of our focus on outreach last March and started to use our website and the town's website as a primary way of pushing information to road users and other stakeholders along the Route 28 corridor. We put project information, road diet guidance, and contact information on the website, and had a PIMA as our online mapping tool where folks could drop a pin and identify any issues along the corridor that they were having. Our information that we presented more than a year ago last March received over 1,000 views on YouTube and was rebroadcast on Reading cable TV. Reverse 911 was used last June to reach residents of the Reading area for pushing out information to folks, as well as many other means to get information out to people. We also created a how to use center turn lanes pamphlet that was available on the website and shared via the town's social media as well as MassDOT's social media. And we used social media as well as periodic press releases to get information out to folks. With all the information and the number of views that we received of our meetings that we hosted throughout the last year and a half, we received several comments from via the website and through our PIMA portal. We responded to residents and neighbors, as well as 200 written responses that were sent directly to those who submitted comments. They were grouped into major themes. The primary themes revolved around anticipated traffic impacts associated with the road diet, and where and when vehicles would divert from 28 to side streets. In addition to that, the impact of COVID-19 on our pilot was a significant theme. How are we going to assess something when we knew volumes were not equal to what they were before the road diet was put in place? In addition to that, there were several very specific responses related to drainage issues, businesses. Folks gave us feedback about less speeding that they've noticed on Main Street or improper use of the turn lane. And each one of these items were captured in a database, recorded, responses were sent out, and then we took actionable items. Here, this map shows during the pilot, the number of comments that we would receive along the corridor at each location. So South Street, Dion's and Dynamic Sports, Summer Ave, Bagel World, and the railroad tracks, the car wash. The most comments that we received from a time frame standpoint were last spring when we first implemented the road diet pilot. There were a number of inquiries that came in around Bagel World, and there were several adjustments that we made in cooperation with town staff to address the comments as they came in. We reviewed intersection crash data at South Street, added mirror arrows on Route 28 in advance of the Dion's and Dynamic Sports, changed lane markings, adjusted signal timings, and revised access to and from the Bagel World, as well as some of the southbound markings going into the Bagel World adjacent to the car wash. We also received comments on the northern section during the pilot. Adjacent to the location, you see a number that's reflective of the number of comments that we received for each one of those: Charles Street, Federal Street, Birch Meadow, Forest, Rocky Road, Franklin Street. We revised lane markings, extended turn lanes, installed traffic cameras to get real-time information about ongoing issues that we were observing, and monitored the changes that we put in place. We added a northbound left turn lane at Forest Street intersection, extended the center turn lane, Rocky Road, and extended to northbound left at Franklin Street. One theme that emerged was a need for education on how to use center turn lanes, something that was new to the town of Reading, but something that MassDOT was familiar with as a implementation tool. So we posted to our website a 2-pager on the how-tos and informational, educational information about using left turn lanes. Design adjustments that we made based off of feedback that we received reduced the amount of transitions that people had to make during their travels along Route 28. And the new markings, after the revisions were made, less feedback was received. People got used to the new markings. That information was distributed via our social media as well as the town social media and posted to our website on mass.gov. Some reminders on how to use center turn lanes. They're not used for travel. You shouldn't use that. Never use the center turn lane as an ordinary traffic lane or for passing other vehicles, and center turn lanes should only be used when making a left turn or a U-turn from the roadway when permitted, making a left turn from a side street or driveway onto Route 28. So planning for your turn is summarized in our informational packet. Signaling your turn at least 100 feet in advance of it making your turn. reduce your speed, check your mirrors behind you to make sure there's no one in your blind spot before you turn into the center turn lane, and watch for oncoming vehicles in that center turn lane. When it's safe to use the center turn lane, enter the turn lane, make sure no part of the vehicle is in the adjacent lane, and then wait until it's oncoming there's a gap in oncoming traffic to make your turn. So now I'll transition into a data analysis that we did. The pilot evaluation looked at observations that MassDOT staff, as well as other contract staff and town staff made while driving the corridor. We also looked at observations, community feedback, and that all fed into several metrics, including in the data analysis that we did, the vehicle speeds, travel times, traffic volumes, and driver and pedestrian expectations. I'll run through right now some of the data analysis that we conducted. The average daily volumes on Main Street when comparing 2019 to 2021, there was a significant drop off in April of 2020 at the onset of the pandemic. Over the course of 2020, volumes bounced back to about 80% of what they were in 2019. We continue to see similar trends in 2021 when comparing to 2020 and 2019, where the about 80% threshold is used. Traffic volumes were observed at other locations in addition to along Route 28. Here, this map shows several locations outside of the Main Street Route 28 corridor that were observed through a system that's called Streetlight. These volumes were collected in anticipation of any changes in driver behavior while lanes were reduced on Main Street. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't funneling traffic to side streets when we were reducing the capacity of Main Street Route 28 in Reading. You can see here, based off of all of the data points that we observed, very similar trends. About 80% of the volume is observed on those side streets when compared to pre-pandemic levels. This is again summarizing an entire year's worth of data of 2019 to 2020. Back up a couple of slides. So the 20% change that we saw over the course of 2019 to 2020 is very similar to the changes that we saw come year end of 2020. Again, a 20% reduction in traffic volumes. So we knew the volumes were lower, but we wanted to look at other metrics. Average travel times along the corridor were looked at. This slide summarizes the average travel time from 2019 into 2020 and 2021. This is by month. And then again, average travel times summarized in the morning peak hour and the afternoon peak hour between 2019, 2020, and 2021. And so what you can see between the two slides, both over the course of the day as well as during the peak hours, there was not a significant fluctuation in travel time. The average vehicle speeds, again, remained consistent through 2019, 2020, and 2021. And again, speeds by peak hour, both AM and PM, remained consistent between 20 and 25 miles per hour over the course of 2019, 2020, and 2021. That's despite the reduction in total volume along the corridor. In several other parts of the state, we noticed a significant uptick in average speeds during the heightened peak of the pandemic when volumes were lower. We did not notice those similar trends on Route 28. We noticed a consistent speed pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, as well as pre-road diet and while the road diet was in place. In addition to the volume, speed, and travel time data that we collected on Route 28, we also collected data about regarding congestion percentages. This information is taken from RIDIS, our system that we use for monitoring travel time and congestion percentages. Noted here in June of 2019, so pre-pandemic, several, or at least a couple of the corridors in 28 are indicated on the left-hand image. This is during the 8 to 9 a.m. peak hour. So your morning peak hour, there are times where there was congestion along the corridor. In 2020, much less congestion. 2021, some congestion. But what we didn't observe was a flood of traffic to other roads other than Route 28 or increased congestion on those other roads. This is a system that we have in place and will continue to monitor even post-implementation of the project. This is looking at the afternoon peak hour. Again, more congestion noted in 2019 as compared to 2020 or 2021. The key findings were that traffic volumes have stabilized around 80% of what they were before the COVID-19 pandemic, and average speeds on Main Street have stayed relatively consistent, while other roadways in the region have seen an increase in speed during lower volumes. And that average and peak travel times have stayed relatively consistent along the corridor. We didn't see an increase in delay despite the reduction in lanes along the corridor. Now to the South Main Street design. What we've noted is that based on our findings, we believe the pilot configurations have reduced vehicle speeds and improved pedestrian safety. North of Summer Street, a two-way left turn lane will be implemented, and south of Summer towards the interchange would remain as a 2-and-2 configuration, similar to what has been in place since we implemented the road diet pilot last summer, so in the summer of 2020. One of the key findings that we observed from road diets throughout the state was a reduction in speeds and a reduction in pedestrian risk when crossing the roadway. There's elimination of a double threat, which would occur when two vehicles traveling in the same direction on a 4-lane road, one stops, lets a pedestrian cross the street, and that vehicle that stops and lets the pedestrian cross the street then is blocking the sight line of the pedestrian as well as the driver to the pedestrian. That double threat is eliminated when a road diet is put in place. So I'll step through the implementation for the from the interchange of I-95 and Route 28 and walk you through from left to right is north on the plan set displayed on the screen. From the interchange through the Hopkins Street intersection will remain as 4 lanes as it was before the road diet pilot, as well as it is today during the pilot. That will extend all the way up to and about the Summer Ave intersection. There will be minor modifications at the Summer Ave intersection, where today the left lane northbound is reduced from 2 lanes to 1 lane, and then a left turn only lane is developed. This will be modified slightly to have dashed lines, signs, and pavement markings indicating that the left lane is for left turn only. This is based off of feedback that we received at the previous public meeting in June. The Hopkins intersection and north of the Hopkins intersection, there's a curve both horizontally along the roadway. It turns to the right if you're going northbound, as well as there's a hill, and the crest of that hill is where the curve is indicated on this plan. That made it challenging for some drivers to notice the lane drop arrows on the pavement, and so it was modified based off of that public feedback. It will operate very similarly at the intersection, similar to how it has operated over the course of the last year plus while the pilot has been in place. No lane configuration changes are proposed at this location. Continuing north of Summer Ave towards Minot Street, the pilot configurations, the 3-lane configuration, will remain in place after the final implementation. It's very standard application of a 3-lane cross-section with a center turn lane for accesses to and from the side streets, as well as residents and businesses along the corridor. North of Minot Street will also remain very similar to, it will remain the same as it does today as part of the pilot. There'll be a left turn lane only, lane into the bagel world, as noted here on the plan, just right of Minot Street. And north of there, we'll transition back to 4 lanes at the railroad tracks. So for next steps, recapping our schedule, we'll prepare and adjust we've prepared and adjusted the structures over the course of this month that we're in now, August of 2021. And in the next 2 weeks, we'll start with paving and line striping work. We'll continue to monitor and gather public input, and we'll have the new contact information where feedback can be given to MassDOT. And we'll give construction updates, and project completion will go out through our press office, the MassDOT press office. And we'll continue to coordinate with town staff on any feedback that we'll be getting, or that we will get from folks both on this call this evening as well as through other means. Continue to available safety, speed, crash data over the life cycle of the pavement. In most cases, a pavement similar to what we're installing here on Route 28 lasts anywhere between 10 and 20 years. Over the course of that, we will monitor changes or any feedback that we get from the public, similar to the way we would on any of our other facilities. District 4 Highway Director Paul Stedman's on the call. He receives information from cities and towns all over the district, and I work very closely with Paul's counterparts throughout the state on state roadways and addressing any issues that come up related to safety and speed and crashes. And we'll have ongoing communication or routine meetings with the town staff, both for this project as well as other projects along the corridor. I'll now transition it to Paul Stedman, our District 4 Highway Director. One of the items that was identified by the town as an opportunity is the pedestrian crossing treatments, both at Knollwood Road and Minot Street, where we already have installed pedestrian crosswalks. We're proposing to maintain those crosswalks at those locations and are considering enhancements to those crossings, including rectangular rapid flashing beacons. This is something that we'll look to evaluate at these locations and can install in conjunction with this roadway reconstruction project. Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Andy. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Paul Stedman. I'm the District 4 Highway Director, and Reading is one of the towns that we cover in District 4. So as Andy said, one of the things that had come back to us during our many coordination meetings with the town of Reading staff was the pedestrian crosswalk treatments at these 2 locations, Knollwood Road and Minot Street. So we've started to evaluate whether or not, what types of treatments, enhanced pedestrian safety treatments, could be applied there. And we believe that the RRFBs, or rapid rectangular flashing beacons that Andy noted, may be appropriate for both of these locations. So what we're going to do is continue to evaluate these locations as the project winds down, to confirm that, to continue to gather feedback and input from our counterparts in the town of Reading, as well as our own internal staff. And then if those elements are determined to be appropriate for these locations, we will advance them through a separate contract using a district-wide pedestrian safety contract, and that can very quickly be implemented. And these units, as they've come to grow from a technology standpoint, they can be now introduced in a solar fashion. So very little undergrounding that would disturb any of the work that's being done as part of the project. Next slide, please, Andy. So I just wanted to touch upon just real quickly the other project that is about to start in this area of Route 28 in Reading. That's the Hopkins Street intersection reconstruction. That will add a new traffic signal at the intersection, along with rebuilding the intersection and adding crosswalks, signalized crosswalks. It will also feature new and upgraded traffic signal equipment at the Summer Street intersection. So one of the things that we're doing right now is just coordinating those two projects. The Hopkins Street project was in the design phase while the road diet pilot was underway. And with the decision to maintain the road diet pilot markings in the area of Summer Street, our design consultant for the Hopkins Street project is just going back and doing some minor modifications to the design detailing. So what we expect to be seeing on that project for the remainder of this construction season is primarily utility relocation work. And then the full construction operations for that project will start in the spring of 2022. And next slide, Andy. And just wanted to, a real quick update, during our evaluation period, or when we were gearing up to do the final paving in the northern section, we had been contacted by National Grid about some issues with a section of their gas line in the town center, Route 129 towards Birch Meadow Road. And it was a rather large section, but through some further reconnaissance that National Grid was able to do using some cameras, they were able to isolate the section that where the water intrusion was getting into the line and creating some service and reliability issues and safety issues, frankly. So we worked with them to be able to implement some limited spot repairs ahead of our paving in the north section. And we believe, and National Grid believes, that they've addressed the issue and that no further work would be required in the immediate future. However, if that were not to be the case, and National Grid were to go out and need to do some more elaborate or extensive work that would impact the pavement structure that has just been put down, they would be required to obtain an access permit from MassDOT. And instead of a trench type of repair, we would hold them to a higher degree of restoration of the pavement to put in not only a permanent pavement structure, but also come back and mill and resurface segments, an appropriate segment of the roadway, and to put in to restore the final wearing surface along with any disturbed pavement markings or sidewalk areas, so that ultimately the investment that we've made in this corridor will not be impacted to any significant degree. Next slide, Andy. So I think that wraps up the presentation that we're going to give you this evening. So I want to turn it back over. Oh, before I turn it back over to Jeff, I did want to point out, Andy had mentioned, for further follow-up, we certainly want to provide our email address. So MassDOT has an online feedback system, and you can specifically get to any inquiries or commentary or questions can be specifically routed to that email address that you see at the bottom of the slide, and those will be auto forwarded to our district office, and we will be happy to review and respond to any individuals. And then just again, as far as the website itself, there's still a wealth of information, and that website will continue to be updated with information as the evaluation of the success of the road diet continues. So with that, Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Paul. So like I mentioned at the top, at the conclusion of this presentation, we want to devote as much time as we can to questions, answers, and discussion. I see, so I'm going to walk through sort of how we do these discussion portions virtually while I'm walking through those guidelines. I also, as is tradition, want to recognize Representative Brad Jones, who's in attendance tonight, and thank him for his coordination and on behalf of his constituents throughout this project. Rep Jones, if you would like to say any words before we go into Q&A, just raise your hand or put something in the chat, and we will happily give you some time and space. And for everyone else, There's one hand up as well already, but so you can either raise your hand to be unmuted for verbal questions, and my colleague Erin will help sort of steer through that as we go, or you can submit any questions or comments you like using that Q&A panel, which is the two bubbles at the bottom of your screen. If you don't see either of those, shake your mouse a little bit and the toolbar should pop back up. We ask with all MassDOT projects that you, if you're comfortable, please state your name before the question and try to limit it to one comment or question at a time, roughly about 2 minutes or more. We don't have a huge room tonight, so I don't anticipate any problems with this. But just, if so that we can get through everybody at least once, try to just be respectful of everyone else's time. And then finally, I don't believe we have anyone listening in on the phone right now, but if we do, you can dial *9 and we'll call out the last 4 digits of your phone number and then unmute you when it's your turn. So I'll read through any text questions that come out throughout this discussion here. I don't see any at the moment. So Erin, I guess we'll start with hands.
Yeah, so the first hand is Deb. So Deb, you can now take yourself off mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks so much.
Okay. I did notice that the signage just north of the square by the fire station has changed. I mentioned that at the last meeting that you really couldn't see that signage, so I noticed why further north. So I appreciate that change. My question tonight is, Andy did not disclose the statistics on the pedestrian crossings and related accidents. Are they available? And is it expected that pedestrian crossings would increase along the corridor, given that the lanes are now limited to 2 in most places where they used to be 4?
Sure.
And that's it.
Thank you, Deb, for the question. Deb, we don't have, or we're not presenting any of the crash data related to vehicle crashes or pedestrian crashes that occurred during the pilot itself. But as part of our ongoing safety measures at MassDOT, we continuously collect crash data along all of our state highways. And in most cases, Deb, what we do is we compare, instead of 1 year's worth of data, we group it into 3 years worth of data. Oftentimes, like with any data that you're collecting, there can be outliers. So we wouldn't want to judge the success or the failure of the implementation in such a brief moment, or base our decisions of the pilot based off of the crashes that would occur in such a short window compared to the life cycle of a roadway. That said, we did look at crash data that was occurring during the pilot, and it helped inform some of the adjustments that we were making. We do anticipate that more people will cross the road because there's fewer lanes to cross. So that's where the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that Paul mentioned will help enhance the safety of those crossing treatments and eliminate the double threat. So it's something that we're looking to continue to analyze in the coming years, but didn't want to present that in any conclusive way this evening. I don't know if that answered your question, Deb.
Close enough.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. So Krista R., you can now take yourself off mute.
Hi, thank you. Similar to what Deb just asked about the crash data, I'm very interested in that as well. And I'm curious if the public safety chiefs have been able to contribute any of that data, and is that being used to compare with the data that you're collecting? And part of the reason I'm asking that is where I live, more on the 28 north side. As you're driving north on 28 approaching Lafayette, just past Forest, where I live, there's an incline. So as you get into the middle lane to take the left, there's a big blind spot. I've had 3 near misses with head-to-head near crash. I have 2 new drivers in my family, and I'm extremely concerned about that blind spot area, particularly at night. And then the flip side of that is, as I leave my street, because there is a wall, you need to pull out a little bit past that wall, almost into that lane to take a right, and now an impossible left. So this has been extremely challenging, this road diet to me where I live in particular, and I'm very curious about the crash data. So I'm wondering if somebody could comment. I don't necessarily think it's appropriate to wait a 3-year life cycle when decisions are being made now about the diet. And I'm very curious what the public safety chiefs have been able to contribute to this. Thank you.
So a couple questions there, Krista, and if you don't mind hanging on, I just want to make sure I'm answering each of them. In relation to coordination with public safety at the town level, we've continued to meet at least monthly and at times even more frequently with town staff, including folks, the chiefs themselves, as well as their representatives at times, to discuss all of the feedback that we've been getting. So we would usually break out the meeting into 3 topics, one being engineering and design, which I would lead, the second being implementation and construction, which Paul would lead, and the third being public feedback that we've gotten. And Jeff Dietrich, who's on the call right now, would lead that discussion. So it's been a very collaborative process, I'd say more so than any typical project where we weren't waiting for 3 years. I outlined the hundreds of comments that we got and the changes that we made in real time with the construction staff and the contractor in place. What I was saying was I wouldn't want it as conclusive one way or another. We have noticed fewer crashes occurring during the pilot than pre-pilot, but that is not telling the whole story. You really have to look at multiple years to have a strong takeaway. With the crest curve, the hill that you're referring to, that is something that we've discussed as a project team and we'll continue to monitor going forward. The question I had for you, Krista, was about the wall. I believe as part of the road diet, when you're making a turn onto Route 28, there should be a shoulder there where there wasn't. And I wonder if, one of the reasons why we put the road diet in place was to increase the ability for people coming out of the side streets to see oncoming traffic. If there's a vehicle right up against the curb in that outside lane of a 4-lane cross section, it's actually harder to see them. So I don't know if for some reason the specific location you're referring to makes it more challenging.
Yes, I would say I'm on Fairchild, and I had submitted written public comment way back when, and just actually twice, and never heard back. I'm expressing my concerns about this, but you do have to pull out considerably because of the wall on the right, and then also the leaves on the left, which is a non-issue in the winter. But I appreciate your feedback, and I appreciate your comments. I would like to hear or somehow just be in communication with what is happening with the project team, because that blind spot is very concerning. And if there are more people driving, and also, unfortunately, what we're seeing is that the delivery folks are parking in the middle. And as you're coming over that crest, if they're parked there, that's going to be a head-on collision. I know the police are working on that and trying very hard to be involved, but that's been an issue in our area as well.
We have engaged with the town staff, businesses where we've identified issues with the delivery trucks utilizing that center turn lane. So we'll note this location as well.
Between Forest and Fairchild, and I think just with so many more people home and home shopping, there's certainly a lot more deliveries, which is an issue. But that blind spot really concerns me, particularly with two new drivers.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Krista.
I don't have any text questions. I don't know if anyone else on the call wants to raise their hand and say anything as well. Oh, and of course, just as I said that, I did get a question. So I'll read this out from Jason. Thanks for the update, and in particular on the crosswalk enhancements, as it doesn't seem to get used much and is at the bottom of a crest. Would you consider slightly relocating the existing Knollwood crosswalk, perhaps closer to where more people do cross, including teens, nearer to Starbucks and Perfectos, since those are across Route 28 from one another? Someone was hit at that spot not long ago. Thanks again.
Sure, I think in addition to the two crosswalks that exist today, Knollwood and Minot, Jason's referencing either adding or either relocating the Knollwood crosswalk or adding an additional crosswalk to connect folks from Starbucks to Perfectos, or from one side of the street to the other in the proximity of the Starbucks and the Perfectos. It's not something that's come up on previous calls, but it's certainly something that we can collaborate with the town staff on. The request for the RFBs or enhanced crossing treatments at Knollwood and Minot came out of a collaborative discussion with town staff. So I would want to make sure we're not missing something by proposing an additional crosswalk in that area. But thank you for the feedback. I don't know, Jeff, if we've noted. I think this is the first time that request has come in. But yeah, certainly something that we could monitor. Crossings are a critically important part of corridors like this, where oftentimes the pedestrian desire lines aren't along the roadway, but across the roadway. We wouldn't want Route 28 to act as a barrier or one business center to another. But what we do want to do is make sure that we're doing it safely and in a location that makes logical sense. And if folks are crossing there anyways, certainly is something that we could work with the town on. I don't know if Paul, you want to add anything about the process for adding crosswalks on state highways outside of this project?
Yeah, and thanks, Andy. And it's a great question. I was just kind of looking at Google Maps right now. Minot and Knollwood are about 1,450 feet apart. And the area that Jason was referencing is probably about the one-third to two-third kind of split, with it being, one-third kind of closest to Minot. But I think, as you said, Andy, anytime where you start to have those uses that are kind of connected but across the street, and you may have people that want to go from one side to the other, I think we'd prefer them if it's able for them to be able to walk rather than get in their car and drive across the road. That would be something we would want to at least consider and see. So I agree with your thought process of kind of doing a team back with the town, see if this has come up in the past, or if there's been a other discussion about this, and then we can certainly start to look at the feasibility and appropriateness of implementing something along those lines.
Thank you both. That answers the open question. Aaron, any hands or anyone else?
There are not.
All right. So I don't know if folks have other thoughts. We can certainly hang around for more time here, but don't want to hold people away from dinner if folks are aiming to go get dinner. So Andy, Paul, Dan, any other thoughts you wanted to share, or do you want to? Go ahead, Andy.
No, just that I've got the email address up on the screen right now for contact information. You can also visit the website. This video is being recorded and will be posted to that website that's listed on the screen as well. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, this is a roadway that MassDOT is responsible for. We own the roadway, we operate, and we maintain it. So despite that there was a pilot in place for a number of years and a somewhat conclusive presentation on recommendations for the south section and our timeline for implementation, we'll continue to own, operate, and maintain the roadway going forward, and would take feedback through this website, as well as through the email address that's listed here.
Yeah, so we would encourage, I know, like you mentioned, we've been working very closely with the town to republish anything we share. So when we record that video, we'll send that out via our own channels, our own email address, but we'll ask the town to post it on social media as well. So if you all see it there and would like to forward it and around to your neighbors and friends who couldn't make it tonight, we would be obliged as well.
Yeah, and Jeff, if I could, I just wanted to follow up on Andy's comments about the schedule. We will be starting the production paving on the south section, targeted for September 12th, Sunday, and then we'll be shortly after the paving is done. We'll be doing the final layout of the pavement markings and whatnot. So it's going to be a busy month of September to complete the work out there, and I just also wanted to just thank all the staff from not only MassDOT, but the town of Reading, and also everyone that's participated from the public and everyone else for participating in this study to try and make some informed decisions.
And sorry for the dog barking during my presentation.
All right.
Not
So thank you all again for coming. I hope you all enjoy your night. We will stop the recording at this point and close the meeting. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night.
Recording stopped.
Thank you very much.